Soaring friends. I am Vitaly Portnikov. Russian President Vladimir Putin, having guessed about Novorossiya again. According to his interview on the parade of the visit to India, Putin is well aware that Russia has fallen out of the Donbass. That Novorossiya is a Viskov Ishim Shlyak. It showed that TPR Putin speaks for everything not Tilky about the Donetsk region. And Tilky about Yakutaka Novorossiya is overstated. About the territories of the Zapaska and Kherson regions of Ukraine. I conduct frequent operations on my territories that were occupied by the Russians in another 2020 another company. And with a year it was annexed in administrative cordons outside the Paris and Kherson regions of Ukraine. And about Bilsh a broad plan. The same political project about Putin from the meeting of federal fees in the Russian Federation. Dedicated to the annexation of Crimea. Putin, having handed over the so-called on Ukraine. I am tied up from the beer and beer regions of our Ukraine. And the most about the entire territory in Moscow, I was talking about Novorossiya. I am, of course, before the Russian Federation. On the 24th of the Fierce, 2020, Putin spoke to his friend under his and firm the corner about the KOB, so-called special military apparatuses. So I said in the topic of the protrusion, about the fact that Maya Russia will ensure the rights of all the peoples of Ukraine. Do not torture me of such peoples. It is important to give Ukraine to ethnic and Ukrainians. And we mark, I declared in the 2014 kind, the people of Donbass, the people of the Donetsk region of Lugansk. And with a year you are all the people for the Paris region, whose Kherson and often occupied by Russians and territories in a pseudo-referendum of the independent power, I will come to Russia. But Rivno with such a rank, Putin was getting ready from a diet of 2020 of a different kind. Another puppet in Vlad. I'm in Kiev, I'm going to bury him to the Russian troops with the holding of strong and low referendums at the gathering. And at the beer hall of Ukraine. And there is an extremely large section of these fake referendums with the proclamation of the independence of the regions of Ukraine, and their recognition to Russia. And that is often in Ukraine. I will not have a referendum program that will become such a new Belarus. Ukraine, I will take into account Putin's puppet and icons and all adoration. To Russia already in a stripped-down look. In that plan blitz crookedly, about we talk to a fierce 2020 another hand. TPR Putin would not turn to those models on his representations of Trump and Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. And the conversation about the fact that the so-called Russian minds do not mean anything real. And the Ukrainians are beginning to seriously negotiate, and maybe it really needs to be heard. And often on the territory of the Donetsk region, and the wine will end. And Trump Rubio says that the territory Yaku is protected by Ukrainian temples, and it is still occupied by Russian. And temples early. And do not bash a simple speech in Zagolin and about Donbass. Prote that Putin, sucking the minds from the direct to himself, on the destabilization of the political situation in our Ukraine. Adoring hands and Trump, this is the Ukrainian political occupation of the Russian troops and the Donetsk region of our Ukraine. And the surrender of these fort, I have already richly at Rocky in defending the Ukrainian forces. And Yak Tilky and Putin put at risk and destabilization of political life in our Ukraine. The Russians are handing over buckets about Novorossiya and will extort the Ukrainian Kornist to expose who's for the search. And the Kherson regions. Well, we know. So where is Hitler? With the KOB extorting the Czechoslovakian to him control over Angola, the British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain, and the French Prime Minister gave Adolf Hitler literally for the spread of the president's mission from Czechoslovakia requested to Berlin. and told him that Maya from the Narthex of Ukraine to the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia, and Maya directly to the Reich Chancellery to sign and her year of the factual liquidation of the sovereignty and independence of her power. Putin has absolutely the same plan for Ukraine. Tom is not to be deceived. Unfortunately, the withdrawal of Ukrainian troops from the territory of the Donetsk region of Ukraine in exchange for supplies, in the fire on the Russian-Ukrainian front and in Zagoli. Putin's clear understanding. Still, Shidny regions of Ukraine, Russia statues, and frequent. And pived. It is known that Putin makes salami tactics a shlyak. The Donetsk region was extorted from the Kab by the Kherson stutter. Well, we will, of course, take Kharkiv, Mykolaiv, and Odessa to Ukraine. The sovereignty of our Ukraine is not yet going to reach the sea, so one of the most important bodies of Russian leaders, and I would say one of the most important strength of the Russian people, is Pivchev's expansionist number of his president. And here it is overstated, of course, and of course, the Americans gave up. Of course. And the same Donald Trump, I say more than once, that Putin needs the whole of Ukraine himself. The basics of everything on Tilka Donbass, so the name of Novorossiya. And also, of course, what is caused inadequately. Eyes are closing on the directory of the intentions of the Russian president. Not looking directly at Putin's expansionist adoration, it is absolutely obvious that the gentry in Ukraine and the destabilization of the situation in Europe will be one of the most important elements in Russian politics. From a logical point of view, the yaks are all in the ranks of the American President Donald Trump. Of course, I can get. And the fact is overstated by the fact. I just poured from Vitaly Kushner. I just poured from an oyster of American representatives from the Ukrainian delegation. Started with national and defense at the mayor. Putin is absolutely calm. The sky was not for rocky Russian-Ukrainian guilt. About Novorossiya, the Russian Yaku reset forces. So nothing would have happened in principle. So it would not have been discussed. Let's say, and there's a cut-down package of Putin's extortion to our Ukraine, look frequent Donetsk region. So not in illusions. And not for us, not for Trump, not for Vova, Ruby is bored, and not for those who want to reason with and direct the body of Russian expansionist policy to Ukrainian. Finish on the topic of the channel, subscribe to it, subscribe to my social channels in Patreon, Coffee, and Donatello. You help YouTube develop the resource sponsorship function itself.